blessed be the name of the Lord. That's insane. He lost everything. And then later in the book, it's also like, it's a great book. His friends are trying to tell him to curse God, and he does all this, and he stays on the straight and narrow. But he says, blessed be the name of the Lord after all of that happened. So, go back to James. There's my bookmark. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. So it's good, and that helped him grow. All of those things helped him grow. At the end of the book, after he got a lot of things happened to him. He also got some disease, and it was awful. After all of it, God gave him twice of what he had before. So all the donkeys, oxen, camels, sheep, everything, he had double that amount. So you can say he passed the test or whatever, but there was a reward at the end. And although it may not always be a physical reward such as that, a lot of times it'll be a spiritual reward that we'll get. When we go through a trial, it's a test. So why do trials happen? They're tests. That's kind of the first question. What do we do when they happen? We'll keep reading James. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach. It will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach. That confused the heck out of me in the first 10 times I read it. I had to read a bunch of other stuff explaining it and ask some other people to explain it, but I got it eventually. When you're going through one of those trials that said in the verse earlier, ask God for wisdom, and he'll give it to you. That's a lot of fancy words they use, but that's what it's saying. Ask God for wisdom. But the way that, at least I interpreted it when I was reading it, I kind of knew it, is it's asking God for guidance through that trial. To give you the wisdom to get through that trial, to know that it's a trial, and to get through it. But that's not all that it says. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. You have to ask in faith that he'll answer you. But also, if you ask in faith, you're going to do whatever his answer is. Whatever his answer is, even if you don't want to do it. Whatever his answer is to how you're going to get through this trial or whatever decision you need to make, you have to do it despite what you want. Because that's faith. Stepping out and trusting him. Probably my favorite illustration, or one of the earliest illustrations of faith that I learned was, I was probably in 6th grade, and Nathan showed a video from Indiana Jones, and I never thought about it. I don't know if you know this, Indiana Jones, great series. There was a huge canyon, and so he gets to this little thing, pulls out his instructions, basically, and it says, you're just going to have to walk across this. And so he's right here, and he's like, oh gosh, it's really far down. So he steps out, and then there ends up being this invisible pathway. But I never thought of that as being faith, but that's what it was. He had faith in that instructional handbook that he had. He had faith that it was right, and he totally put himself out on a limb in faith of that. And that's what we have to do. We have to ask in the faith that he will answer, and then follow him. The best, or the thing that I like the most that had to do with that, very specific, it's very short, is you don't have to flip there. You can if you want. It's pretty short. We're just going to read a couple verses. A lot of you know this, but probably haven't thought of it as a trial. This is when Jesus walks out on the water. So this is Matthew 14, 27 to 29. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter, so as I was saying, just to make sure everyone's clear, Peter, the disciples are all in this boat, Jesus is out on the shore, and he walks out on the water, and they're like, "Oh, what? It's like a ghost." But it's Jesus walking on the water. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Now I had never really thought of this as a trial. Remember what I said earlier, where a trial is when you get to a point in your life where you have to decide if you're going, there's only two options. You're going to follow Jesus, or you're going to let the world get the best of you. And that's what this is. He first asked for wisdom, guidance. I mean, he put it in more of like a imperative form, if you know what I'm talking about. He didn't have a question mark when he said it, but he was basically saying, "Hey, can you let me come out of the water?" He just said, "Yeah, come." So he asked for guidance, he asked for the wisdom. He asked for guidance. What should I do? Jesus said, "Yeah, sure, come out on the water." He asked in faith, and he did it. He stepped out on the water. Keep reading. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. So, he had the faith. He did that part right. He went out on the water, but when he got out there, he saw the wind and the waves, and they were huge. He got distracted, and as I said, he let the world get the best of him. And he took his eye off that one rock he had through that trial. The one rock he had was Jesus saying, "Come," and he asked in faith. So that would be, I'll be safe when I get there. But as soon as he started looking, being distracted by what the world was throwing at him, he started sinking. So he started out strong. He started out totally the way that you're supposed to do it. But what also happens in our lives, at least it happens in mine a lot, kind of like how I was saying at camp. Really spiritual, so spiritual. Ready to go out and tell everyone I know that Jesus loves them. So he stepped out, he was so ready to go. As soon as he got out there, saw reality, he saw all the stuff around him, he sank. And he failed, basically. It's kind of what Jesus is saying in the next part. And so when you are at camp, crazy. Step out into reality, boom, hits you really hard over the head. It says that's not what the rest of life is like. At least that's what the world says. And a lot of times we say, "Oh, okay." And we stop doing what we said we were going to do, just like Peter did. So in its own way, this is a trial just like we experience. Which you start out strong, but eventually you fail. So, what do we do when we come to these trials? Ask for guidance, and faith, and follow him. These are like really, if you get anything out of this, there's 3 questions. Why do they happen? A lot of times it's a test. What do we do when we get to them? Ask for guidance and follow them faithfully. Like, wow, you're saying that a lot. I know. It's not because it's like a little thing I do when I get nervous, keep repeating myself. No, that's because we have to know that. Because no matter how many times we come and we listen to something like this, no matter how many times I read the same stuff, whenever I experience one of these things, The same thing happens every single time. It's been happening since I became a Christian when I was 7. It's been happening all throughout middle school, all throughout high school. I read everything. And I read about these trials and, oh, we're going to go through some bad things and say, no, God, this time it's different. This time I'm going to do it for you. And every single time, the same thing happens and I fail. And it's so hard to get into our heads what to do. Why do we follow him though? When we ask for guidance, we go out on faith, why do we follow him? What's the purpose? Why don't we just let the world take us? Why didn't Peter just be like, oh, you want me to come out into the water? I'm just going to go for a swim. And just like, nose dive in there. Why don't we just kind of sit down and just kind of let the world smack us around? So Charlie asked me, when I was first planning this, said, this is the beginning of the series that we're doing out of James, as you can tell. So I want you to answer the question, who is God? Who is God? Because before we can get into all the other stuff that James talks about, we have to know who it is that we're listening to. Who is God? And we have to know who he is, or else why would we follow him? But the great part is, who he is the reason that we follow him. Because there's so many words that can describe God, but of all the ones that I've heard or thought about, only one is that he is holy. That's the closest one I feel like totally captures everything about him. Because holy means he is set apart. Set apart from what? He's set apart from this world. He is perfect and he is greater than anything else in this world. And that includes his plan. His plan for us is greater than any plan that this world gives us. That plan that we have to go to college here, wherever it is, his plan may be to go somewhere else. And you get rejected or something. And just, no, sorry, can't come here. That could have been God doing that. It could be his whole plan for you to go here because you're going to change someone's life. And that's just an example of, there's so many options. That's just one of the kind of things that's on my head with, college coming out, scholarships, college applications, all that. That's mostly what I'm thinking about. But every plan that he has is better than what the world has. So God is perfect. 100% perfect. Totally better than anything in this world. The coolest thing that, at least that I've read in the Bible that talks about his glory and how different he is from this world was in Moses in Exodus chapter 22. Moses went up on the mountain, was going to talk to God, and asked to see God's face. And God says, you can't see my face, because you will die if you see my face. Which is also in Indiana Jones. Just saying, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Thanks for making me watch those, Dad.